Carlos Nelson with the Kansas City Business Association. And tonight, we have one of our CEOs, uh, I like to say one of his partners. I be talking in plain English. I don't dress it all up. And he's in the business of real estate development and banking. And without further ado, Mr. Nigel Johnson, welcome to the show, Nigel, and welcome to
Oh, thank you.
the KCBA as a member.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nigel, run it down from kindergarten on to where you at now. Then we'll talk about your actual company. Tell our audience who you are, where you come from, what school.
hmm
In that narrative, I want you to uh, make special mention of mentors, men and women that really affected how you developed your mental acuities and help you with your value system.
Oh, wow. Okay. Um, Born and raised here in Kansas City. This has been home. Actually, born on the Kansas side. Came over here early, and I had mentorship early on. I was the only child for many years. My sisters came later, so a lot of the people that I looked up to were seniors. You know, I used to sit around trying to watch. You talking about kindergarten? I used to sit around trying to watch cartoons, and they wasn't having that. You know what I'm saying? I was watching Prices Right and all that kind of stuff, and how I lost myself, or some would say how I found myself at that time, was really pouring in the newspapers. I would sit around, and that's how I learned to read really early. I read the they used to call them the funny papers. I don't know if you remember that way back then, right? So I used to read the funnies, the comics, but it didn't stop there. I'd read about business and politics and housing and just current events and just whatever I could, because I wasn't going to get to watch cartoons. They wasn't going for it, right? So Miss Wilson was one of my earliest influences, which was she was my babysitter, but she was more like a extended family member, if you will. Okay. And, growing up watching her, I picked up a lot of her habits. She used to do gardening and just various things that I just learned as a young child. And when I got to 4 years old, um, my mom realized it was time for me to go to school. I didn't wait till I was 5. I actually went to, it used to be called WSH Christian Academy, right? Down over there on off of Linwood and not too far from Prospect. It's that big church that everybody's familiar with over there. Okay, that's where my kindergarten used to be. And that's how I started school, kindergarten, first and second grade. And then I transferred to the public school system in third grade, where I went to Phyllis Wheatley. Okay. So I had a bunch of cousins, family members, and things that went there. And it was just, I had, I had just a different type of experience when I went there. And I started my first business when I was about 7 years old. Okay. And what I would do was it would be a big group of us kids. We'd go walk into the store on the way to walking to school in the morning. And I used to go to what we used to be called rail sales over there where, Seton Center is now, right? Okay. So I go in there and I would go buy big packs of bubble gum. It used to be the 10 packs, right? There were 10 packs of bubble gum, and the packages each would have 5 in them. So it'd be 50 sticks of bubble gum, right? And I go to school and I would sell these sticks of bubble gum, right? And my mom, the whole time, what I was thinking was, you know, my mom, by this time I have little sisters, and I knew the budget was real tight, and I didn't want to be a burden on my parents. By then my mom had married my stepdad, my dad, and but I knew the budget was tight, and I didn't want to be a burden on them. So I was like, you know what? If there's a way I could find a way to make my own money, it just, I didn't need a whole lot, but if I could make a little bit of something, then I wouldn't have to ask them for anything. So that was where my motivation came from, right? And I would go sell sticks of bubble gum up there at school until they shut that down, because I became a little bit of a, distraction to a bunch of the other students and things. But it taught me a lot about just entrepreneurship. This is just me with my own experience, right? Beyond that, got to, of course, cutting grass and doing all the different types of things you could think of that little kids would do to try to make some money and earn, whatever. Grew up and what ended up happening was, of course, by the time I made it to high school, got close to a good friend of mine,
What
Jason. His
year
mother.
is it? Excuse me for butting in, but
Sure.
name the year so our viewers can associate because you
Okay.
know how Kansas City has changed over
Yep.
the last 20 years.
Okay. Kindergarten. Let me see. I'd have been four, been 82. Okay. We're talking by the time I get to high school, that would have been what would that have been? Shoot, graduate 96, that'd have been 92. So 10 years later, right? Um, yeah, and I came up out of high school in 96. Now, high school, I got close to a friend of mine named Jason Wyatt. His mother, Wonder Wyatt, used to work at Ad Hoc Group Against Crime. Okay. So she would have us come up there and we would go volunteer a lot of times to go discuss various things, ideas on how we can reduce violence in the community or just all types of things. That was actually my first exposure to being, on TV and things, when they would bring the cameras out and various people in. And it was just, it was a huge experience for me. Wonder was a huge influence in my life. In fact, she got me my very first job, which was an internship up at City Hall, and I worked at the Human Relations Department. So I would go around with lawyers, and we would go investigate businesses to make sure they had proper access for disabled people. And I don't know if you remember back when they had the new zoo project. I don't know if you remember that,
Yes.
but I got to go see that kind of behind the scenes before it was open to the public. That was one of my memories from then, and just meeting a lot of the people that were really influential in our community. And so I've always kind of had that in me to care about other people instead of only being focused on self. You know.
What would you say that experience at City Hall? I don't know whether you know, I used to own the second largest black general contracting company in Kansas City.
That, that
And
I didn't know. Yeah.
and I renovated. You mentioned the only reason I'm butting in. You mentioned the
Hmm.
handicap. I did. I renovated the courthouse downtown, the courthouse in
Hmm.
Independence, Lake Jacomo Sheriff Station, because they had, all the bathrooms had to be accessible and all of that.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I'm trying to picture where you were at in school when when we were doing all of that type thing. So
Yeah.
after high school, what was
Hmm.
going on?
Um, well, before I go there, I'll say that because you asked where I went,
Right,
right?
right.
So 6 through 10, I went to Lincoln Prep. Okay. So I always kind of knew I was going to go to college. I had some big cousins that I didn't have, again, I was only child all those years. So I had big cousins. Those were kind of like my siblings. And because they were going to college, guess what? It was just a foregone conclusion I was going to. The question, though, was where, right? And I went to Lincoln Prep 6 through 10, but I went there so many years. I was like, look, I got to get a change. I've been the same building, same walls, same people. I love y'all, but man, I got to get a change. And I convinced myself that I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay. So back then, of course, the schools had all the strands and all that. So I transferred to Northeast because I wanted to study law. Okay. So I went there and I was on the law side, taking all my different classes and things like that. And I came up out of there in 96. Now, I didn't have the best guidance, or you could say perhaps I wasn't the best prepared in the sense of knowing about application deadlines and various things. So it was a bit of a challenge for me. And I ended up getting a few scholarships, and the one that I went with ended up being a full ride to Lincoln University in Jefferson City. Okay, so I went down there, studied business, and that really grew me up a lot because here I am a few hours away from home. Um, I was kind of on my own. And again, just like that 7-year-old, I didn't want to be a burden on my parents. So here I am. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any of this. So I had to just kind of figure my way out and work my way into adulthood. Okay. So, yeah.
Uh, so now we know a little bit about you. Now let's talk about your company. Tell
Mhm.
our audience what the name of the company is. What is the company designed to do?
Okay. Albright Homes is a property management company. before I talk about that, I probably had to go back a little bit to college. My mother was renting a house that we've been staying in since 1986. And close to 1999, the landlord decided he wanted to sell all of his properties. He wanted to retire and liquidate his portfolio. And there I was, going to school down there. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any job. I didn't have any cash. I didn't have any credit. And my mom called me and found out that the house was being sold. And I promised my mom I was going to find a way to buy her house, despite that I had none of that. And I was like, look, I'm going to find a way to buy this house. And what I did was that same particular semester, I was taking business law and Professor Broadus. And I remember the very first day of class, I came in, sat down in the back of the class, and I had a habit of looking forward in all my textbooks and stuff like that so I can get a preview of what the semester was to come. And I'm sitting there halfway paying attention, but he walked up in front of the class and he said, I'm Professor Broadus. I'm standing in front of you, so therefore I'm a college professor. I have a practice in Columbia, Missouri, but I'm also a real estate investor. So I'm an attorney, I'm a college professor, and I'm a real estate investor. Which one do you think pays the most? Half the class said attorney. The other half of the class said, college professor. I'm sitting there peeking down in my book, and I didn't even think he could hear me. I said, real estate investor. He said, you up there, at the top of the class or whatever. You got it right, and that stuck with me. So when my mom called me that night, months later, talking about the landlord was selling the houses, he passed, flyers all over the neighborhood saying the house was for sale, and our neighbors was mad at us because they thought we owned it, and we were selling it. But no, we were renting and he was selling it. And that's why I promised my mom. So I stayed up that whole night. Ended up going up to Professor Broadus' office, 3 a.m. I'm standing there waiting for him to get there. He came and I said, look, I got to buy my mama's house. They selling it. You going to help me? So I wasn't taking no for an answer. He's like, okay, well, come on in here. Let's talk about it. And he helped me with the strategy. We ended up, beating down doors of banks and doing all we had to do. And I was able to find a way to buy my mom's house. So that was my introduction into real estate. Okay. And to actually buying my first property. Now, I usually introduce myself by telling people I'm a fourth generation real estate investor. Okay. Now that's from my dad's side. My great grandparents on that side, they bought 300 some odd acres, and we still have that in the family down in Oklahoma. Okay. And a lot of those principles was passed down to my grandmother, my father, my biological father, and then to me. And that was something I was running from my whole life. They told me about the power of real estate and what we can do and how we can house people, how we can help people and their big dreams and things like that. But all I saw was riding around with my dad doing, maintenance calls and people not paying rent. And I'm like, I don't want no parts of that business. You know what I'm saying? So I went off to college thinking I was going to find anything but that. That's why I went and studied business. That's why I majored in business, thinking I was going to run from that. But then reality hit when my mom called me that day. And I was like, look, Mom, I'm going to find a way to buy this house. So I did. That semester, I was taking 18 hours, so I didn't have time to work or anything like that, no job, anything. At the time, my mom was working. She was working in the child care department at what used to be called Minute Circle, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's called the J.D. Wagner Boys and Girls Club over there off 24th Street off Elmwood. And she would go up there every day working with the children. And she would tell everybody, my son bought my house. My son's my landlord. I'm like, Mama, quit telling people that. It's embarrassing. She's like, boy, you can't stop me. I'm going to tell people what I want to tell. I'm like, okay, all right, Mom. Well, it ended up being a pastor that would come up there and go talk to the kids, work with the kids. And he overheard my mom, talk about what her son did for her, right? He's like, oh, your son buys houses? Well, let me talk to him. At the time, I'm working at the nation's largest tax preparation firm that might be located in Kansas City. Okay. So that was my profession at the time, right?
You didn't want to give H&R Block no. You didn't want to give them no plug.
They were good to me. They taught me a whole lot about taxes. I learned about business tax. I learned about real estate taxes. I got a lot of promotions. I got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to tax preparation and just business in general. That actually became like a big foundation for me moving forward in business. And that's why a lot of my advice and guidance and consulting for a lot of other business owners. And that's a big part of why I push people that look like us to own businesses. Of course, real estate as well, but entrepreneurship a lot of times is because of the tax benefits. When I was working there, I would get access to all these different people tax returns, right? And they call in for tech support or whatever the situation is, and I would see the returns that would come from our neighborhoods. And as Black people, we would have W-2s, we would have 1040s, and that's about it. Well, I see some returns over there from Johnson County. I see Schedule A's, B's, C's, D's. All. I'm like, wait a minute, they getting money all kind of ways that we wasn't taught about. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, what's going? So they.
Information, hey, Nigel,
Mhm.
information is one thing.
Yep.
Applied information is a total different process. And first of all, we have lack of information. And then when
Hmm.
we do have the information, 90% of us is just information. It's,
Yep.
it's not processed, and the next step to apply it doesn't take place. But again, you got to meet everybody where you can meet them, and that's why uh, you have a fee when they talk to you.
I've had to learn that in recent years. That was something I bumped my head on, for a lot in the beginning. So that led to me get my second property. Okay, that experience there from that pastor that I'm still forever grateful for. Um, the third property I bought was an apartment complex. Okay, and it was Forest Hill Apartments. First thing I did, because I understood business, I understood marketing. I'm basically got a minor in that, you could say. In fact, I wrote a marketing book. It's my first book. But first thing I did was rename the apartment complex to the Future Homeowner Apartments. Why? Because I understood from day one that the people that came and moved in, you know, I had a very how do I put it? It was you know, I had a responsibility in sitting down talking with them, that I knew that if I didn't have a conversation with them, then nobody else probably would. And letting them know that, hey, look, there's some things that you can do to own a home. I did this for my mom. I was able to help her in this kind of way. This worked for me. I was able to overcome all these obstacles, and maybe you can too. Now, of course, back then in the late 90s, early 2000s, we're talking about they throwing out mortgages to anybody with a pulse. It might be a little bit harder now, but back
No,
then, I'm like,
it
look, you
is a
better,
little harder.
yeah.
They just had a special on PBS, and you're not lying. Anybody with a post, they said the lending, Lehman Brothers was backing
Mm-hmm.
all of that, and you didn't have to have no credit, bad credit, and they would just give you a loan. But that almost took our banking system down.
It did. And I'm screaming from rooftops, buy a home, buy a home, buy a home. All my family members, everybody that would listen. I was screaming at people that wouldn't listen. They still wouldn't listen. But that's okay. I tried and the best I could, and try to guide people and try to lead by example. Um, you know, Ultimately I ended up publishing my second book, which is actually How to Buy Your First Home in Kansas City. I don't know if you can actually see this.
Can't see it,
But
but
yeah, but that's okay.
send me a JPEG of it.
Yeah, I got it for you. But that was something that I published, that I basically documented my journey of how I was able to buy my first home and overcome things. Now it's due for update. That's something I'm going to be publishing an update in the next couple of years or something like that, because obviously this market's changed. But the key things inside of it are true, in that over time, with a long enough timeline, real estate always wins. Okay, that's my belief. With a long enough timeline, right? So
It has to win. Shit, they're not making no more space on the planet. We on a finite,
man,
and we multiplying like cockroaches on the planet.
that's
Uh,
right.
yes. Uh, key point in your statement. Given
Hmm.
enough time. That's what
Yep.
happens with gentrification. You can be owning the property, but can you pay the taxes and everything for 25 years until that cycle resurfaces with
Hmm.
investment? And it's very important. There we go again about knowledge. Is
Yep.
having the knowledge and then applying it. So we got about 10 minutes left in this
Okay.
interview. Talk about some of your recent accomplishments, and talk about uh, in a quick step manner what your year in review for your business and what you looking forward to for 2025.
Okay. Um, you know, with our business, of course, it's about more about helping to encourage people, to get involved in home ownership, and really on the business side, building portfolios because we're severely underrepresented in that. When I go in these rooms and I'm invited to speak to real estate investors and thought leaders across the country to come up with strategies on, mass acquisitions and how do we address the affordable housing crisis, all these big questions. I'm looking around the room, and there's not many people that look like us. Okay, it's just bottom line. It's not very many. So if we want to control who lives in our neighborhoods, then there needs to be some ownership associated with the ability to choose who gets to live there. Right? It's hard to impact the outcome if you have no authority on making the decisions of who gets to live there. I mean, that's just what it is. Okay. Um, I actually started a nonprofit 2017. It's called the Hood Hope Foundation. Okay, and with that, we've been actually housing people that get out of prison since nobody wants to rent to them. We've been doing first time home buyer classes, credit restoration classes, financial literacy classes, neighborhood cleanups, just all these different types of things that we're intended to continue to do. And the purpose of the organization is to enhance housing opportunities in the communities that we serve in. Okay. You asked about what does 2025 look like. In the past, most of our focus has been on more green type of approaches as far as renovating existing housing stock, acquiring properties that's been dilapidated or forgotten, fixing those up and putting those back on the property tax rolls. But a big part of what the immediate future is going to look like is in the development side. That's what we've been developing these relationships with developers, builders, contractors, and so forth. Because as you said, we just don't have the inventory to be able to, accommodate all the people that's coming. The World Cup's coming in a couple of years. The spotlight's on Kansas City right now. So the time is now to do something about that to get in preparation for it.
Can you speak on you're part of Josh's team that is partnering with Cascade
Mhm.
Media Group and its subsidiaries. Can you
Mhm.
speak on, are you excited about that opportunity?
Absolutely. For one, like you said, I mean, knowledge without application or implementation is basically just entertainment, right? So with this opportunity, we're able to do a whole lot more than just entertain people. We're able to actually empower people and change lives. You know, there are a lot. I truly believe there's a lot of people in this world that they just don't know. So if they're able to get shared this knowledge, we're able to access these people and help them to understand what they need to do with some implementable steps, then they'll achieve things. One thing that really shakes me up is it was a couple years ago we had a partnership with the YMCA on Linwood where we were able to come out on the Martin Luther King Day and we did an affordable housing workshop, right? And that room was full of teenagers, 18, 19-year-olds that care about the future, right? That lets us know we're in the good hands, right? But the thing that really shakes me up is the fact that, when the Fair Housing Act came out, Black people actually own more houses then than they do now as a percentage of the population. So we have all these laws, these protections, these so-called protections in place, but I measure things by outcomes. What is the outcome? And the outcome needs to be us owning some property collectively, us being able to build. We're talking about generational wealth. Well, that starts with owning some assets, performing assets at that. And what better place to start than the roof over your head?
All right. With that being said, as we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.